sharing the presentation, and then we can start here. The presentation is coming. Thank you, Mamta. If you can move in the view. Can you put in the view forms so that people can see the slide? Just a few seconds that we are putting the presentation in the, very good. If I guess that you put, we can use this way. If you don't, if you are not able to put in the other way of viewing the slides, Mamta. Okay, so. If you agree, Farhad and Ajay, we can start our webinar, and and of course we can give at the beginning a warm welcome to everybody. I'm just a second that I'm taking all the here. We would like to give a warm welcome to all members of CII India and those who are connecting from other chapters of FBN International. This webinar is all about sustainable thinking and insight on how business and families can adapt to crisis. For those who have never met before, my name is Paolo Morosetti. I'm a professor of corporate strategy and family business at Bocconi University in Milan, and I serve as a board member in various medium and large family businesses, all highly impacted by the pandemic spread. Today, I'm connected from the north of Italy, and where I have been confined for almost 2 months, as many other Italians. Next week, the measures taken by our government will be softened, so we are moving from phase 1 to phase 2, and we are now discussing as a country how to balance the measures to help the economy to recover, and also how to protect the public health. And we're going to talk about these things during this seminar. And this seminar has been designed in a period where it is really difficult to be optimistic, I have to confess. But we have the responsibility to be positive and to disseminate good vibes. I guess that this is one of the key traits of the entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial family. So we have this kind of responsibility, and we cannot forget it. The cover of The Economist published yesterday has a title very nice, The Business of Survival. Is a clear view of what will happen in the next months. And we know that countries in lockdown, accounting for over 50% of the global GDP, never happened before, while crisis has been described as severe and extreme. I would say that this cover evokes the idea that we discussed as CII FBN India last week, when we put together this seminar. The idea, instead of speaking about survival, we decided to use another, I would say, image to adapt to crisis. Because our idea is to speak to those who have leadership and managerial roles today. We know that it's a difficult period of time, but the message of this webinar is that you are not alone. FBN is a forum, and as a forum, we are here to share, to discuss, to get ideas, to find the right energy to move forward. This seminar will provide you some food for thought about what to monitor in this period, how to think about the next phase. Of course, leadership and managerial principles are pretty internationalized, but we believe important to stay close to the Indian business landscape, culture, and specific traits. This is the reason why we have two distinguished guest speakers, which I will be presenting in a few seconds. They will provide a specific view on India and specifically what they are doing as an entrepreneurial family and what they are doing in the role that they play in an association like FBN. Before going to the agenda, allow me to thank you indeed, FBN India or CII FBN India, for organizing this community, all the team led by Amita Sankar. So before starting, some preliminary instruction that you can see on the screen. We have decided, and we beg your pardon, to keep all the microphones on mute. In this way, we can have a good, I would say, conversation without having problems in listening. But of course, you can interact to the chat or through the chat. Please use your full name and organization so we know who has joined, who is speaking. And I would like to remember that this webinar will be recorded. And in this way, we can provide this webinar also to people who cannot join today. I guess that this is we have a comment? No, we can go ahead. Mamta, if you can switch to the next slide, please. This is the agenda. We are going to talk about, we have 3 points on our agenda: the welcome address, the presentation, so this insight, and then we have a Q&A. I guess that we are going to stay together for 60-75 minutes, about 60 and 75 minutes. So it's an absolute pleasure to introduce the two guest speakers now, and Mamta, you can move forward with the presentation. Slide. I have the pleasure to introduce you Mr. Shriram, who is the chairman of CII FBN India Chapter and the chairman and managing director of DCM Shriram Ltd. And we have also Mr. Farhad Forbes, who is the chairman of FBN International and co-chairman of Forbes and Marshall. Thank you so much to both of you for joining this webinar. And I guess that I can hand over to Mr. Shriram for a first welcome address to all the people connected to this webinar.
Thank you, Paolo. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar we are having at this time of crisis when we're going through a major upheaval in the entire world economy. Before I get into that, it's a pleasure on behalf of CII FBN India to welcome Professor Paolo Morosetti from Bocconi University, who is sharing his thoughts with us, and also have Mr. Farhad Forbes with us, who is Chairman FBN International, and he's been a major driving force among the activities of FBN International all over for the last couple of years. As we are seeing, ladies and gentlemen, we are going through a very severe pandemic. I think first time we have ever experienced something like this. How long it will last, no one knows. Italy has been through a very tough patch itself. We have seen that. So have many other countries of the world. I do feel that in India, the government has taken strong action fairly quickly in trying to control this pandemic spread, and actions are still going on. But we are a challenging country. We have 1.3 billion people, and the diversity is very large, if I may say so. Well, of course, the density is also very large of the population, but simultaneously, our discipline level is also fairly low. So how long it will take to flatten the curve, we still have to wait and see and try. But I'm sure with the effort of everyone concerned, we will come to not too negative a situation of this pandemic. like we're seeing in many other countries. I would say the sort of challenges are many, but frankly, the income of people at all levels is getting affected very badly, especially the underprivileged or the unorganized sector or the daily wagers or the contract workers. And that's a very big challenge for a country like India because the numbers are very. Similarly, for small and medium enterprises, the cash flows are all absolutely frozen. They have no money coming in and there are liabilities they all have to address. So I think that's a very big challenge also. Simultaneously, big businesses also have a challenge. They also have a large number of people. Large businesses have a very large salary and wage bill. How to meet that is going to be something we're going to see, how each one can do that. But again, coming back to small people like the shopkeepers or the unorganized sector, frankly, I was just thinking, I used to get a barber who used to come to my house and he used to, come once a month or so. Now, a person like him who depends on his daily income, he's got nothing. So for a month, he's been now locked down. So it's a very, very big challenge for many people. It's good to see the government has taken steps for trying to provide food. They have done some work in terms of providing some economic benefits and economic assistance to all types of people. And we are seeing something new coming up every day. I do feel that I just hope 3 points I'd like to make before I close right now. That I do hope the government takes up a very proactive approach towards giving income to the unorganized sector people and below the poverty class people through the Jan Trinity, which was started a couple of years ago, giving 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 rupees per head into each of their accounts to make it viable for them to survive, as well as give confidence that the government is with them. Secondly, I think small and medium enterprises require a lot of help. I do hope the government takes up activity there. And third, I would say is government should move towards at least looking at 5% of GDP coming in as assistance during this very difficult period. But at the crux of the whole thing, ladies and gentlemen, in family companies is how families manage the enterprises during this difficult time. Our company itself has taken many steps. Maybe, Paolo, I'll share that little later after your presentation. But at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you here. And we look forward to a good discussion, a good dialogue, and a good exchange going forward over the next 1 hour. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Farhad Forbes, as Chairman of FBN International and a distinguished entrepreneur in India. Farhad, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar which we're doing here from India. At FBN, we have dramatically moved in these last few weeks, actually last couple of weeks really, to engaging with our members through using technology. Because as Ajay mentioned, we have all been impacted tremendously all over the world. And through if you look at all our chapters, our 35 chapters, 65 countries, every one of the countries has been affected, some much more than others. And having you, Paolo, here from Italy is particularly relevant because, after all, Italy was till recently the most affected country in the world as far as this terrible pandemic is concerned. So we really like to hear from you and look forward to your insights as well. We had a webinar earlier this week on Monday with Elena Zambon, who is one of the vice chairs of FBN International, and she spoke about what they have done in Italy. And we had one on Friday last week where we had Randall Carlock and Annalie Carlson as well in both these webinars, essentially talking about what we as family businesses can do in crisis situations like this. Both those webinars are available online, and you can actually view them in case you were not present for any one of them. As you know, I'll talk more personally about how things have affected us as a business and us as a family as well, subsequently after Paolo has spoken, and answer any questions as well. But I can just mention right now just a few introductory comments. The impact of this has been even more shocking because of the speed at which things have moved. And it really impacts you when it impacts you yourself. And what we have seen here is that in the early days, when this first came to light in sometime in December, when we were hearing about this in China, we all thought this is far away. And then, of course, you hear about it impacting other countries in the world, and particularly in Italy, and then other parts of Europe, in Spain and in France. And then it comes to India as well. And we have this 21-day lockdown, which is supposed to end next week, but there's a big question mark as well, whether it is indeed going to end, or we're pretty sure that it probably will not end, and it will continue in some form or the other. There are, when you have, I read something which was interesting in this period when you're impacted with something shocking like this, and you go through 3 zones of your state of your mind. The first is a kind of fear and a shock zone. You're just shocked with what's happening. And because it's happening at such a rapid pace, you are essentially just trying to fathom how you have to deal with things around you. You have to secure your family, you have to secure your business, and then you just have to get on with life. So that's the first phase. And I think when you move beyond that, you go into what is called a learning zone. And I think with some of us now are sort of transitioning from that shock zone to the learning zone. We're learning new ways of doing things. Actually, what we're doing right now in FBN, one of the things that we have done remarkably well, I think, over the years is socialization. And socialization whereby we get people together, we get families together, where we share experiences, we share learning. Obviously, that is not possible physically now. There was an interesting article by a professor of psychology at Stanford University, which I've sent around to some FBN members, where he talks about this word social distancing and says that's actually not a good term to use. It's a wrong term. And though we have physical distancing, which we need to practice, given the circumstances, it's possible to practice distance socialization. And that's exactly what we're doing now within FBN India. Through these webinars, we are providing that opportunity to provide the same degree of opportunity for learning, and also socialization. In fact, we have, I saw Dariusz from Poland, from our FBN Poland chapter online now, and he talked about having an evening where people get together within the chapter and have a drink together. We have had a cross-chapter aperitif session between FBN France and FBN Italy. So these are all things which are possible. And of course, the opportunity for the same degree of learning by way of content that we provide and through sessions like this. There's a lot of learning which we have gone through in our own business in terms of how to manage things, we can talk a little bit more about that, using webinars to reach out to customers, to reach out to our own members in the organization. And then there's also time for a lot of reflection and learning and self-improvement for ourselves, because we're not flying all over the world and, you know, going from one meeting to the other. We're actually in our homes and we have time to actually reflect and learn. And then the third zone, which I personally still have to get to, but it's called the growth zone. And that growth zone is when we really focus on the future, focus on how we take our learnings, which we've benefited from, and how we can apply them for the future and how we can apply them for the benefit of others. And I hope that through our FBN network, there will be many, many such learnings which will become the new standard for the future as we go forward. So I'll end with that now, turn it over to Paolo so that you know, we can hear you, and then look forward to many more comments and opportunity for question and answers later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farhad. Let's move forward. We can go to the next slide, and let's introduce the 3 points. So sustainable thinking. So I would like to touch in this presentation 3 points. What we know at the moment. The second point that is very important for us. So there are signs of hope. It is, as Farhad said before, we need also to look into the future with this positive tone, and then we can go through some insights that we have learned in Italy, but I guess that many other countries are thinking, just to understand how we can be close in a pragmatic way to those who have responsibilities today. Next slide, please. What we know today, I guess that we have a lot of information, and of course, speed and uncertainty is a very peculiar combination, not easy to manage. Is probably the sharpest downturn from the Great Depression. It is a matter of fact. And if we have a look into the latest projections about the future, the numbers are not really enthusiastic. The GDP in US, the GDP in America and in other countries, I guess that will decrease probably double-digit. We know that the small and medium enterprises and family businesses will be more touched, as well as also the service sector. And this is not just an economic problem. There are also some social problems behind. So the government has to combine economic measures, but also social measures. And what we have learned is that the crisis is faster than our bureaucracy, because our bureaucracy, government, is trying to follow up what happens around them. Next slide, please. So, as Farhad said before, Italy started or began to talk about the crisis, I guess, in February. At the beginning, we were in a situation in which the idea was, okay, there are few cases. It's not a problem for the country, it's just few cases. Then in few weeks, in the boardrooms, so people having responsibility for the business, as you that were connected to this webinar, they started to say, okay, but when can we get back to the normality? Because the first measures were introduced in Italy. In Italy, was very different than in India. I know that in India, in 4 hours, your government decided to lock down 1.5 or 1.4 billion of people. In Italy, the decision was to go or to start with small restriction in a geographical area, and then step by step we arrived to close all the business. The second question, of course, was how we would pay workers. That's a problem. The liquidity is a problem, as I've mentioned before. And then the discussion in the boardroom started to touch other points. What are our peers doing? Because we are not alone. In Italy, we are a sort of country extremely connected with the global chain. So we were very scared. There are a lot of fears that we were isolated from the global supply chain and we can lose our business also in the future. What should we do first? Will we have to face a second wave of infection in months to come? This is another big question on which we don't have at the moment a clear, I would say, answer, but it's something that entrepreneurs have in mind. Can we get fiscal and monetary support as private corporate? And what's next? Those are examples. Next slide, please. Those are examples of how the people started to talk about this outbreak, starting from the short term, then try to understand what can happen in the phase 2 and so on. There are some signs of hope. So this is a sustainable thinking means that we need to move from a situation in which we have a lot of fears, in which we need to start learning and socializing or thinking about the future in terms of growth. For sure, if we have a look in the future, the business landscape will change a bit, because on one side, government, they are launching different emergency and financial helps. Whatever it takes is an expression that as European and Italian we know very well, because in the past we had the Eurozone crisis and the director of the central bank said, whatever it takes, we need to save the euro. And now with whatever it takes, we need to save the local economies. And of course, India, like Italy, you can see in this figure, in this picture of the economist, we are two countries where the fiscal stimulus has been done, something has been done. Probably we can do better. Of course, there are a lot of balance sheet constraints, but for sure the two countries are in the area where they are basically locked down. So we cannot make business, we cannot socialize. But this is the phase where we are. Now we need to move to the future. Can we, the next slide, please? There are signs of hope. So this is just a picture of the globalization. Just to say that if we look into the past, and this is a message that we will develop in few seconds. If we look into the past, also in the past we had crisis, and after crisis, the global economy was able to come back to a growth path. You can see here the GDP of the global GDP from 1989 to 2018, and you can see that in 2009 we had a big crisis. Of course, was different than this one, was the financial crisis, but basically in the following years, the global economy was able to come back to a growth path. So we are in a crisis, very deep. But then if we take a breath and we think in the long term, sustainable thinking, probably the situation will improve. We need to understand how to adapt, of course, in this period. Next slide, please. Another sign of hope, there are a lot of family businesses, and we wish you that you can enter in this club, that were able to survive more than 1 century, more than 2 centuries. They went to wars. So I guess that as a family business, we have some ingredients in ourselves on which we can leverage to understand how to do. And this point will be further discussed in the next slide. So what is the challenge? Next slide, please. The challenge that we have in front of us is making sustainable thinking at work. So as a professor and advisor in many occasions, I say that, okay, let's think in the long term, let's think in the long term. Now we need to understand what does it mean. So next slide. I try to put together 9 points and that I would like to share with you what we have learned during these last 2 months in Italy in the board discussion, and what we have learned not just in Italy, in many other countries, in order to how to adapt crisis. And I'm going to go through these 9 points, and I'm going to give you some examples. Next slide, please. And the idea that I have in mind is that please go through this list, try to understand what you are doing, and try to understand what you could do in the next week. So it is a dialogue, this one, and let's try to keep or to take some ideas. So let's go through this list. And next slide, please. Here, the first point is, I guess that in this period of time, we have discovered that family business that are reacting fast and well, they are leveraging or building on the extreme closeness of family to the business. So now it's time that the family should be close to the business. So it's extremely important to have good roots, but also to be ready to have wings. So what does it mean, roots? In this period of time, I attended, I was invited in some family meeting organized online, in which the leader of the family or the business, of course, they reported back, or they reported what happened in the business, what are the challenges. But I guess that in this family conversation, one of the topics that I listened was that family has a collective pride to family values. And this is a sort of driver to stay together in this period of crisis, to define why we should concentrate in the business now. I say that family business is a combination of family and business. And now if you don't save the business, it's very difficult then to save the concept of family business. So the family has to move a bit more the discussion on how to provide an added value in terms of support to the business. And the values are very important. And on top of that, I saw many families spending time not just providing bad news, but also going through the history of themselves and try to remember what the founder did at the beginning, the intuition, the spirit, the entrepreneurial spirit, the sacrifice. So just to create, I would say, a platform inside the family, so a sort of cohesion that is necessary when you have to make hard choices. And this is what we have to do in this period. So I guess that the leaders of the business at the moment, in this specific moment, they need to have the full support of the family, because they are in a very tough position, making choices about the business, making choices about employees, making choices about the priority. And the family should be united. The second point about this extreme closeness, I guess that this is the right time for a call for action for the next generation. So if the leader have the roots, if the family have the roots, who are the wings? The wings is the next generation. So the next generation should be involved in the discussion, just to understand what responsible leadership means, or what responsible ownership means. And then perhaps the next generation may be involved in this new phase, because perhaps they can provide new ideas. They can be, what I say, wealth generators. So they can provide, I would say, new business opportunities, new way of thinking about the future. So the first message, the first insight is that family business who are going through the crisis, one point on which they are dedicating time is on family, on the conversation between the family and the business. Family should be informed. Family should support the people who have to make choices in the business. Family should be ready to support not just now, but also in the next month. The next generation should, of course, listen, but perhaps they can become a driver for the next phase. Next slide. Second insight. At the beginning, in the middle of March, I read a very nice article on Harvard Business Review, and you have here the source, Lessons from Italy's Response to Coronavirus. I reflected a lot on that, and I say, yes, it's true. We have to be very, very careful in decision making at the moment, because it's true that there is no time to waste. So in crisis, of course, you have to understand, we're going to talk about that, scenarios and so on, but you cannot waste a lot of time, because as Farhad mentioned before, things are moving fast. And it's true that you cannot control everything, but you need to adapt. I thought about many discussions that I had, and I recognize that sometimes there are some cognitive bias. What does it mean? That sometimes the entrepreneurs, that they feel, I would say, the stress of the situation, they tend to gather information only to confirm their hypothesis, and not the information to challenge their hypothesis. So their hypothesis is that the business will continue in the future as in the past, for example. This is not true. So in that period of time, you cannot get just confirmation. So selecting the information that makes yourself calm. You need to also to be open on the fact that the future will be non-linear. And so in this period of time, we have to be more open to discuss with others, as we are doing today, and not just to build on the feedback of the inner circle, the friends, some entrepreneurs on which I have good relationship. You need to expose yourself to the diversity of ideas. This is extremely important, because we know that our brain in this kind of situation, for cognitive bias, tends to select the information that make the brain relaxed or calm. No, we need to challenge ourselves a bit, and also to accept that we cannot control the situation. We can just to understand and follow the situation, adapt. The other point that we have to be very careful is mentioned in this article, analyzing what the Italians did in March. Try to find a systematic solution. So yes, it's true, now we have a liquidity problem and we try to fix it, but this is not systematic. This is just one piece of the puzzle that we need to put in place. So this means that as leader, is like when you think about the strategy, you need to have a systematic approach. What will happen in the market? What will happen with the suppliers? What will happen with raw materials? What will happen with the cash flow? So we need to have, I would say, a systematic view on what happens in the future. And of course, this ability to quick learn. And another things mentioned in this article that I found in many Italian companies, try to get precise data about what happened in your company, what happened in your customer, about their expectation and so on. So I guess that since there is a lot of uncertainty in the environment, at least in how it works your company, you need to get precise data about the process. I give you an example. I'm serving as a board member of a chemical company. Now we have day by day from our, I would say, sales force, an expectation of what the clients can buy in the next 3 days, 5 days, 6 days, 10 days. This is a company that can work in Italy, because some companies can work. And in this way, there is a continuous change in the production plan to adapt it, to understand how to optimize it. So careful with decision making, and we can move to the next slide, means that we cannot use the same way of thinking than in the past in this period of time, and we need to challenge ourselves a bit. Third insight, when you are in crisis, of course, after 2 seconds, you are completely focused on the today business, and this is what happened in the first weeks, also in Italy. But I would say that it's not probably the right, I would say, path to find a way to exit. In the managerial theory, there is this concept of dual strategies. Dual strategy means that if you are a good leader, you need to balance the management of today's business and the planning for the future. And I guess that this concept is very close to which we discussed last year in India, navigating paradoxes, short-term, long-term. And managing today business means three actions. The first two are about OPEX and CAPEX, operating expenditure and capital expenditure. For sure, it's important to cut the operating expenditure, to postpone because you need to save your cash for the next days. But be careful, because this is discussion that we had, not to cut what is the source of your competitive advantage. So because the business will continue sooner or later, you can cut, you can reduce, you can reallocate, but you have to ask yourself, what are the sources of your competitive advantage? For example, if the service, the source of competitive advantage is the level of service to customer, if you are a chemical company, if you are a logistic company, you have to be careful in cutting too much. Of course, you can take in the short term another perspective for the capital expenditure. You can postpone, of course, with a selective approach, not to burn cash. And probably this is I would say this is the main action that I saw at the board level. Try to postpone the capex, of course, with this selective approach. So means we need to balance the liquidity with the possibility to stay on the market in the next days. Or we might temporarily decrease all the strategic projects that we approved last year, for example, for the budget, and now they are temporarily not so important. This point is very, I would say, important also in relation to the measures that the governments are doing. So our governments are pouring cash in the economy, trying to support the business. And of course, one of the crucial points is we need to provide you cash for managing your working capital to pay salaries of your employees. But please try to think also a bit on the future. Business innovation. And business innovation, I guess that is the right time to take your business model and asking yourself if it is still sustainable, or change it. And this is also connecting to planning for the future. Don't focus the discussion only on the short term. Try to put in your agenda when you are at the board level with your management team one point about the future. First, to give optimism or a positive view. Second, because this is another matter of fact. In the future, there will be a Darwinian selection. This is a normal, I would say, process that we saw in the past. Since there is a crisis, some companies will not survive, others will consolidate. So we have to be prepared to understand what is your role in the future, what is the chance of your company to continue, or how you can increase the chances. Can we move to the next slide, please? Just few examples. This is the first example. This is an Italian company working for a big group, Decathlon. Decathlon is a non-food retailer. They are famous in Italy or in Europe for one product that is, you can see on the picture, is a snorkeling mask that you can use when you would like to spend time in discovering the ocean. Of course, this kind of mask at the moment has no possibilities to arrive to the market due to the sales volume is really low. So this mask has been or is produced by an Italian company that is located in the center of the pandemic in Italy. And basically, this company was able to take this mask and to use this mask in our hospital to help people to breathe, as you see in this picture. We have a big problem in Italy with our health system. And one of the problems of intensive care unit was the number of, I would say, machinery or instrument to help people to breathe. And as you can see, this company was able to rethink, I would say, one of its products and give back to the society for helping them. But now, this product, this idea, will become a new line of business for the future, because the hospital may use this kind of product in a different way for the future to protect nurses and people. So it's, of course, we don't want to use this moment because we have a lot of debt, but it's just to say that you need to think in a different way. Next slide. I don't know in which sector you are, but at the moment, in the short term, we are seeing a lot of changes in the business model already. First, due to the changes in the working condition, social distances will continue. This is very clear for our companies in Italy. So it means that we have to think new organizational ways. So next week, perhaps new companies will open, but under specific and severe rules. So not all the people can stay, not a lot of people can stay together in a room. We need to give protection. And of course, there are some companies that they are providing all the materials for that. Some important luxury company, they have transformed themselves in companies specialized in textile product for health, for hospital, for people who should protect themselves. The pharma system has already been touched by business innovation. There are some companies who have developed tests for coronavirus. Uber declared that his driver can be used also in the logistic transport, so they can rent driver for the logistic transport where there is an increase of demand. I guess that the message that we have to keep in mind, and this is one of the topic of discussion that we have in different boards, in the medium long term, more or less all the companies will be touched by an innovation in the business model. So I guess that you can see here in food retailing, not food retailing, there are some companies in the furniture value chain that want to use the augmented reality as a way to show the product to people around the world. So education will be completely changed because online is becoming, I would say, very important. I can have a lot of experience in my university. So the message is mastering through a strategy is what are you doing to think about the future? Next slide. Let's move to the next ideas. What are you doing to manage uncertainty? Of course, there is an extreme focus on cash flow. And one suggestion that we gave in the past to the families, please keep cash and liquidity reserve for the future. And now I guess that family having cash and liquidity reserve can support their business. I hope that you have contingency plan and you keep them updated. In what happens in the next 3 months, 6 months, we don't know how the pandemic will continue, but contingency plan can help. So perhaps you have a crisis committee, you meet once per week, you check your contingency plan, you adapt it. Think about scenarios. Scenarios are more to plan the future, and scenarios are for business, but also for the family. And when I say for the family is that perhaps you had in mind a succession strategy in the past that you have to put under discussion today because the situation is completely changed, and perhaps you need the next generation already on board in the next month. Early warning system, as I said before. And another things that I would like to share with you, now the discussion is no more in Italy on customer, what customer will do in the next months, if they will continue to buy, in which amount and so on. Now, one of the crucial aspects is the connection with the supplier and the markets, because you can open, but if you don't have the suppliers and the raw materials, it's a problem. And so there is a strong expectation on what we can do with our suppliers. And another point that I'm sure that will change in the future, and this might be an opportunity, is the redesign of the global value chains. A lot of big companies have understood that having localized their suppliers outsourced in specific countries sometimes it's too risky. So we expect a change in the flow of goods, and this might create new opportunities also for countries like India or all countries around the world. Next slide. Number 5, 9 points. I guess that in a time of crisis, and this was done at the beginning, you have to be a clear chain of command. So it's not time to have family conflict. It's not time to have conflict inside the management team about the different roles. It's not time of having power wars. It's time to understand who is the boss or what the boss is if you have more people having this responsibility. And if you are a multinational, attention about the subsidiaries, because you cannot travel. And you have just the possibility of having this nice way of interacting with them. But this means that the organization should be controlling the center, but also controlled clearly in the subsidiaries abroad. And I guess the subsidiary in this period of time, they can have a bit more autonomy to react to the specific aspect in this country. So it's important to check your chain of command if it is the right one for this period and for the phase 2. Farhad mentioned before an excellent webinar organized by FBN International, and the message was change your personal leadership style. So be more focused on a visionary leadership, emotion matters, listen, be able to define the direction. I suggest you to go to watch this webinar because at this point of time, bosses, the chain of command, should balance the capacity of making decision without wasting time, also with the capacity of orchestrate all people, and some of them might be scared, and some of them might suffer more this emotional period of time. I do hope that you have succession plans in place. Here, some entrepreneurs died. And so on top of the crisis, we had to manage also the succession. A succession is on family level, ownership level, and business level. So who are your key people in the organization? And if for the key people in the organization, key manager, you have already potential successor. Because in time of crisis, you cannot spend time or lose time in this kind of discussion. If you don't have succession plan, please use this time to think about it and to work on it. I guess that also at family level, also the people that usually they postpone this kind of decision for many reasons, I guess that in this period of time, they understand the importance to have succession planning in place. Number 6, debuckling the organization. Since you have to move fast, next slide, please. Since you have to move fast, it's time, try to think how you can simplify the organizational structure, the process, how to make the organization agile. It's in this period of time in which the companies were closed in Italy, we spend a lot of time also as a board, as a management team, in thinking about what to do. So contingency plan, scenario plan, one part that you have to keep in mind is how to streamline the organization to react. So it's another point. And at the moment in Italy, the big discussion is how we can start the phase 2. And this will happen also in India in the next week. And you will start again your business, and you cannot start again as you left the business before. So you need to think in advance in which way you would like to engage people in the next weeks, in which way you would like to come back to the new normality. Next slide, please. I mentioned many times that we have board meetings in some companies once per week, or management meetings. I guess that in this period, if you have an effective governance, corporate governance, you take full advantage from this mechanism because you have a sounding board. So it's true that you have chain of command, but these people need a sounding board to understand, gather idea, gather suggestion, collect suggestion, also manage the emotions in this period. And also as a family governance, I do hope that you have time to organize at least 1 or 2 family meetings with your next generation and with all owners, also the people who are not involved, to explain what you are doing. And because you are managing the family wealth, so you have this kind of responsibility and to report back. If you don't have a governance, if you are not satisfied about the governance, why not thinking of introducing some news, some novelties? Very pragmatic. It's not time to do exercises too much theoretical, but I guess that FBN and CII FBN India and CII India did a lot of workshop in the past about what you can do. Take a couple of suggestions and try to put in place. Next slide, please. Another point that we discover as very important is to be more vocal than usual. There are a lot of family business and a lot of leaders that they don't want to talk too much, but now you need to talk. You need to talk internally and externally. Internally to your employees, in order to give them an idea about what you are doing to protect their health. Externally to the stakeholder, the clients, what you are doing to keep the relationship ongoing, to manage the contact between your employees and the potential customer. And it's not just only of describing what you are doing as mandatory action, but also what you are doing as voluntary action. At the beginning of the crisis, in many companies, the leaders started to write letters to the clients, to the employees, put on the website information about what they are doing. So keep a professional communication. Same thing with the financial institution. I know that liquidity is a problem, but keeping a good relationship with bank and financial institution is extremely important to get the trust to continue this relationship in the next phase. And again, in this period of time in Italy, companies are preparing the communication plan for phase 2. For phase 2 to be ready to send the message to all the stakeholders, clients, suppliers, and so on, what are the expectations, what we are doing for them. And I would like to mention another point, advocacy initiative. Mr. Shriram said before that there is FBN in India, there is CII, is extremely important. This morning, on the main newspaper in Italy, our chapter, the Italian chapter FBN, published a letter to all Italians. You see here the picture is in Italian, explaining what family business are doing for the society and why is it important to come back or to start the phase number 2, balancing the interest of the business with the interest of the nation and the public health. So I guess that this letter is the first time that our association made, and it's very important because it's a way to give the idea of how family business are the backbone of the society, and they have a lot of responsibilities. Next slide, the last one. Demonstrating corporate purpose. I'm sure that in India it's the same. A lot of our companies made with generosity contribution to open new hospital, contribution to the employees in order to get to help them if they are in a very bad situation. For example, Luxottica, that is a big company, they have 12,000 workers, and they will continue. They are continuing to get these workers 100% of pay, even if we have this problem. So it means that the company are closed, but the Luxottica is providing 100% of pay. What does it mean? That in Italy, we have the possibility as business to ask the government to pay about 70% of the salary when we are in a time of crisis. And Luxottica decided to give the 30% to the employees just to save their situation. Or many companies, they subscribe insurance to protect their employees and their families to the problems of coronavirus. It was small things that, of course, are helping to demonstrate the corporate purpose of family businesses. Next slide. I know that in India, a lot of things has been done, and I'm sure that then Farhad and Ajay can give us a couple of examples. So this is the 9 insights. What we did, we didn't stop thinking, we didn't stop building the future, as Farhad said. So try to learn from others, trying to be a responsible leader and responsible owner. And I do hope that you can get inspired from this list. The next slide, please. And if you can do this, I would say check up yourself. I do hope that you can pick up 2 ideas that you can implement in your specific business. But I guess that this insight should be contextualized in India. And I would like to ask to Ajay, Mr. Shriram, if he can share with us what he's doing in his company in order to react to this specific threat.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Thank you, Paolo, for this wonderful presentation indeed. I think it was very topical, of course, but I think very practical, and many suggestions which you have made are definitely something which all of us in industry should think about. I appreciate you asking me our own position in our company. Well, when this situation started aggravating, I think all companies in India and many offices in India and many locations started having people coming into work on a voluntary basis to the corporate office especially. Factories, people had to keep coming, but the work started going down in terms of the pace of activity, and the customers who were the buyers started having problems, because of which there was lack of offtake. This sort of a thing led to a build-up where the pace of running the business started coming down. Ultimately, when the lockdown was announced, and as you rightly said a little earlier with the 4-hour notice, I think the shock was very large. But at the same time, I must say that as a corporate and as our management feels, that was the right decision for the government to do, to try to contain this crisis, which was spreading very fast. So for the first time in the history of our company, of our businesses at, let's say, Kota in Rajasthan, which were running for the last almost 60 years, have we come to a stage of shutting down everything. We closed our urea fertilizer plant, we closed our caustic soda plant, our PVC plant, our cement plant, power plants, everything. Similarly, we have a chemical complex in Gujarat, we closed that totally. Similarly, we have this Fenesta building systems, where we had 3 plants in different parts of India, we closed that totally. So it was really a very big shock which came to us. So as a top team, and we are 3 brothers who are running this business, along with a very competent senior team with us, we got into discussion, dialogues, how to address that. Couple of the things we started off initially straight away is communicating with our employees, top to bottom, of what is the management thinking, and give them that confidence and reassurance that we are with them. So we sent our first letter to all employees in the company, I think within 4 days of the lockdown, stating very clearly our philosophy, our policy, are looking at the business as a long term. We are not in it for the short term only. We have to be careful and conscious, but we will fulfill all responsibilities we have, including payment to all the people it is due to on a sustained basis. So we assured that. The second letter we sent about a week ago where we got into a little more detail of what we want people to start thinking to do. And I'll share some of the points which we shared with our people there across the board. We said that this is the time when you are at home. This is the time when you have time. Please think of what is the personal learnings which each individual can do on the business side and on your personal development side. We requested everyone to do that. As a corporate, we have tied up with many education service providers for doing it online. So we reiterated all that once again and requested them to look at their own personal development as a major focus area. Second, we said was the experience for almost 10 days, 12 days, using digital technology in this form is a new experience for us. We are very up to date on the IT system with our SAP systems implemented over the last 20 years. So we are up to date, but still a lot of the communication mechanism, the study mechanism, the data exchange mechanism we're using today is new. So we said with this sort of a situation today, how do we move and use digital technology in a more effective manner down the line to upgrade our company, to upgrade our operations, upgrade our thinking, upgrade our functions? What can we do on the digital technology absorption, including AI, including IoT? How do we look at all these in a different manner to be able to add value? Third point we mentioned was that, again, considering everyone has time, let's do a little thinking that can we run our own existing businesses and functions in a new way? Can we look at a reorganization of the systems, a reorganization of the structure? Can we revisit our technologies? Can we do net searches in a much more detailed manner to understand what are the latest models being used by the world-class companies, and how do we upgrade and conduct our business in a much better way to enhance efficiency, to enhance profitability going down the line? We also said that each business should make out a detailed plan that when we start operations again, what is the process, and naming individuals with responsibilities who will actually be responsible to make sure the startup process is managed well, safety is ensured, more important, people safety is ensured. What are the people management process of checking each individual entering the complex? What is the temperature? How do we keep the distance? How do we make sure they wear masks? How do we make sure they have gloves? How do we make sure all these people management processes as well as the operation management processes are articulated and detailed to the nth degree so that we don't go floundering around and looking around what to do? We have a planned process in place of how to look at that. The other thing we also mentioned in the second letter to all our employees was, what can the future be for each of our businesses? Can we revisit our business model and look at a new way of adding to the business, expanding the business? What is the most optimum mechanism for running the business in the future in the new environment where the world economies are under stress, the demand structures are going to change, raw material availability is going to change, pricing mechanisms are going to change? How do we look at this in a much more sustainable long-term manner? And we've also mentioned very clearly that ultimately cash is king. We have to be very clear, how are we managing our cash? We must fulfill all liabilities, no question. We must fulfill our commitments. If someone is due money, we must pay that. But how are we ensuring that we are building an organization which is sustainable in the future with a more tighter way of working, a more efficient way of working than what we are doing over the last 5 years, 10 years? And the last, because we are just entering the new financial year, all the businesses have made a budget for the year 2021. We said, well, now is the time to revisit the budget, because we don't know how long the shutdown will be there, even if it starts. What is the pace? Do we achieve 5% capacity, 40%, 60%, 80%, and in what time frame? So I think it is a very important time to revisit all the budgets which are articulated by each of the businesses to come out with new projections for this financial year with wearing a different hat. One has to look at it differently from what one did 1 month ago. So I think these are some of the things which we have taken up. At the same time, I must be honest, we are continuously having discussions with our senior team. We are 3 brothers. We have a con call, a Zoom video con call fixed every day at 12 o'clock, just to catch up with each other. Where are we? What is happening? What's happening outside? What's happening inside? So that we get to know and we can share that with our senior team. Similarly, we have large meetings of our senior executives on a very consistent, continuous basis. So our objective is to keep connected. Our experience says, for the family or with executives, what is important at times of difficulty of this time is communication, communication, communication. Please keep the communication going, be open for questions, and one may not have answers all the time, but we have to put them on the table so we start thinking about it. So I think, Paolo, these are some of the steps which we have initiated in our company, and it's an ongoing process. What's going to happen 1 week from now, we don't know, but our feeling is that there will be some sort of a lockdown continuing, maybe not as rigid a form in some districts or some sectors, but we have to be prepared to run our enterprise efficiently with the involvement of all our people totally. These are some thoughts I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Shriram, Ajay. Farhad, what is your experience in your company, and what are you doing perhaps also in keeping the relationship with your employees? How are you reacting? Can you share a bit your experience, please?
Yeah, sure, Paolo. Actually, a lot of what Ajay has said, we are also, it's very relevant in terms of, what needs to be done. One of the things that, when this all started, and we were going through this phase of, firstly voluntary reduction in terms of number of people in the workplace, etc., and then it sort of moved to full closure. We started using the technology. We actually use Google Hangouts, and we started doing this now. It's now 3 weeks ago that we started, and every morning at 9 o'clock we do a Google Hangout meeting with all our senior managers. So we have about 40 people on the call. It's now a short call. In fact, when we first started, it lasted about an hour, but now it's anywhere from 20 minutes to 45 minutes or so. And what we update is, we update firstly on the general situation as far as, what's the policy, because things are changing so rapidly. So whether it's related to what we're hearing about nationally, what we're hearing locally, what are we hearing about, possibility of opening up, the lockdown easing, issues related to that. We also do a brief update on health. We do a check-in with all our members to see if everyone is well, because that was one of the first things when we were in the initial days, is essentially listening to people and making sure that everybody, all our members, all our employees were safe, that their families were safe. We had to move people around a bit, when people were separated. So we sort of acted on that. And so today what we do is we just do an update on general health if, everybody is well. And this reminds me very much of what Randall Carlock mentioned in his webinars, the 2 webinars which we did last Friday and on Monday, where he mentioned that this is the time to listen to your employees. Ajay also mentioned the importance of communication. And we find actually using video technology even more effective than just sending an email or a letter, because you can actually physically interact with people. So we do this 1 hour session every morning at 9 o'clock, but then we've gone beyond that now. And what we've started doing is that we've reached out to almost every member of the organization who has access to a computer. And now with, again, using Google Hangouts, and you can do the same with Zoom. So my brother Naushad and I are on that call, and we actually have engaged with everybody, giving them a state of where we stand from a national angle, but also as far as where we are as far as the business is concerned. What's happened since the lockdown? Unfortunately, the timing of the lockdown was at the worst possible period, because it was the last 2 weeks of the financial year in India. And consequently, it obviously affects performance. So giving people an update on where we stand, where we ended the year, and what's likely to happen in the future. And then answer questions. You can do this very effectively with the technology now, where we actually get questions coming in from everyone while we're speaking, and it comes on chat. And then Naushad and I respond to those questions, and we have the management team also present who are there to also respond. So those are two things which we have found extremely valuable, extremely useful in terms of providing that communication and also to listening to what concerns of members are. That's particularly important at a time when everybody is in a state of shock, but at the same time, there's a great amount of energy which comes about when people find new ways of doing things, and then they are successful, and they share those successes in these forums. So whether it's running a webinar with customers, whether it's running a training session, or whether someone has personally learned something and wants to share that with the rest of the group, these are extremely effective tools at a time like this, because they're very energizing, and it sort of motivates others to do the same, and also to actually, take comfort from one another in terms of how people are managing their own situations. We have also done some contingency planning. You spoke about it, Paolo, about the contingency planning and scenario planning. Because there is so much uncertainty going ahead, it's probably a good idea to plan for different scenarios. A scenario where things will somewhat restore to normalcy next week, and also a scenario where things may not be normal for quite some time. And if things are not going to be normal for quite some time, then how would we as an organization cope with that? Okay, if movement of people is still going to be restricted, if the factory can only very nominally or very marginally operate, or maybe it can't operate at all for a while. So those are some scenarios which we have to sort of plan, and we've actually done that. And we've done that collectively with the management team. And in fact, we've shared this fairly openly through the organization. I think at a time like this, it's very important that you're honest with your employees and your members, that you share things realistically. And then after hearing concerns, etc., then I think this is again something what Randall Carlock mentioned. After you've heard all that, you need to give some degree of confidence. You need to provide some degree of control on the situation. And that's what we try and do at the end of each of these sessions which we've been having with people. Obviously, cash is very important at this time. So in terms of all these, every morning, the 9 o'clock meeting, the first thing we start with is actually collections. What have we been able to collect? what are the obstacles which are coming in the way of collecting. And a lot of that can be done working from home. And so the collection process has actually been going on just fine with people working from home, our field sales working from home, and engaging with their customers who are also working from home. I'd like to say a few things about the family. I think the family, as you mentioned, Paolo, it's very, very critical at this time that the family comes together. And we, for one, are very, very fortunate that we have a very close and supportive family. So I have my brother, and my brother and I essentially sort of co-lead the company at present. We have my wife is actively involved in the business as well, particularly on the social initiatives and the social responsibility area, which again is a very critical time right now because, you know, it's all the more important at this time in terms of reaching out to the community that we work in and what their needs, assessing what their needs are. And then our son, who's actively involved as well, he is presently with us at home. He's normally based in Singapore, but hasn't been able to go there because of the situation. And then our daughter, who's in California, she's in San Francisco. But Ria joins all our calls. So we have the 9 o'clock call with our managers. She's on that call. It's 8:30 in the evening in San Francisco. And we also have a short family call right after that, where it's just the family, where we talk about the situation in the company very openly and see what ideas there are from the next generation. And the next generation, as you also mentioned, Paolo, are actually the key for new ideas and new ways of doing things. And we have benefited immensely from this sharing, this coming together. And actually the crisis has actually brought us all a lot closer together. What else? I think I can't re-emphasize I cannot emphasize the closeness of the family and the relationship of the family to the business more than how important it is at a time like this. There was a study which we did in FBN with Egon Zehnder about 3 years ago on family gravity. And that family gravity, I think, is what comes to the fore when you have a crisis like this. And I think if one can work on those aspects and develop the gravity which you have, it can only help going forward. And as I said in the beginning, I'm pretty sure that there are many, many learnings which will come out of this crisis, which will actually establish new ways of working together in the future, new ways of doing business in future. And I think we will all benefit from that as well. So I'll just end with that and then take questions if required.
Thank you so much, Farhad. If you would like to post some question, there is the chat that we are trying to monitor, but please send us also question feedback in the next days. So we are going to send you, we're going to share with you the instruction to do that. I guess that in this first webinar, or this webinar about how to adapt to a crisis, the idea was to speak about the future, giving, as our guest speaker said, a perspective, a direction, and then I would like to emphasize some elements that I heard in time we collect some questions. The first one, or the most important one, are some I would say principles: sharing, learning, to be honest with the employee. It's very important in situation of uncertainty, just to remember that there are leaders and there are followers. Followers need leaders and leaders need followers. And followers need to be treated fairly and with honesty, above all in this period of time. and to be open. I see here a couple of questions, and I take one of that. Is from Simone from Norway. It's a question quite, I would say, tricky. I am a business that is already in crisis for 5 years, and now we have also this COVID outbreak. So it is an additional, I would say, threat. What can we do for my position in the board? What is the future? So here we have what kind of reflection. And I don't know if Farhad and Shriram would like to develop some ideas or giving some reflection on that. I would like to say that this is a very tricky question, challenging question. Only one point of reflection. Sometimes it's need to downsize to restart the story of a company. I don't know if this is the solution, but when you have crisis management, one principle that is usually should be checked is that, okay, let's reduce, let's downsize, let's take the good company in order to restart in the future a new growth path. Of course, this is a principle that should be adapted case by case, but it's only to say that crisis means a change of the business model, a change of the organization. You cannot just replicate the past. And this, of course, means that you have to take hard choices. And on that, there is another point that I would like to share. Remember that we are an entrepreneurial family, not just family business. An entrepreneurial family means that you can come from the past with a specific business, but you can see, you can project, you can think about the future with the new business. The long life businesses that I mentioned before, some of them in the past, they were bankers, and now they are textile company. And who knows what they will do in the future. So this is a short comment. I don't know if Shriram and Farhad and Shriram and Ajay would like to add something.
I can just add to what you said, Paolo, to Simon's question, which is a very good question, actually, that when you have a crisis like this, everyone's focused on that. How do you still maintain some element of a long-term perspective? And obviously, first, you have to deal with the crisis. So those are all short-term issues. And maybe one way of dealing with it, and I think what we are trying to actually do is that you budget time. So you spend some amount of time on the immediate, the short-term issues, whether it's cash flow, whether it's business continuity, things like that. But then you can also have separate meetings, and meetings which are online. And actually we find that with these online meetings, they're actually much more efficient because firstly, everyone's very punctual. No one's late, which in our Indian culture is an important change in mindset. The second thing is meetings are for a specific period of time. You don't hang around because you just log off, right? So you can budget your time. So you budget your time for some meetings which are focused on the short term, and maybe you participate in those as well. And then you schedule meetings which are looking at, what are the scenarios for the future? And those scenarios for the future could be actually focused on other more long-term issues as well, which would address possibly some of the concern which you expressed here. And I think it follows through on the next question, which is from Devesh, which is this is disruption to our lives. How do we view opportunity as an opportunity and not make a trap for ourselves? And I think one of the things we should realize is that there are only certain things in a situation like this which we can control. And there are many things that we can't control. So focus on those things which you can control. And worrying about the things that you can't control actually doesn't help. So focus on the things that you can control. And as I mentioned earlier, if you can work out how you can you know, improve on those things and deal with those things which you can control, it becomes very energizing for others in the organization as well, and in the family as well.
Ajay, the floor is yours.
Thank you. No, I would say first, on the first question, where I appreciate, I was just reading it actually, where for 5 years there's been a problem, and now, of course, with this COVID problem, it's getting much more acute. I think, you know, as the largest shareholder, it is in the interest of the family and, of course, the business to ensure some sort of a financial security for the long term and get the business back on track. So I would say one, I do feel, and we do that or attempt to do that quite regularly, is get a lot of outside-in thinking of what are the potential avenues and methods to manage the business differently. I would tend to agree with what Farhad said also, that if you need to prune the business, please do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But as the largest shareholder and the owner of the business, even if one has to get a financial partner at a cost, it may be better to consider that as one of the avenues for taking forward the direction, so that there is a continuity in the business and the Simon and his family still continue. I think these are some areas which could be considered also as an area where something could be done to ensure the security of the business. I didn't get the second question from Devesh. The current time is like disruption in our lives. How to I think this is where, frankly speaking, I think, again, I'll put it this way, Devesh, that communication. I think with your family, with your executives, this is the time to keep that openness going so that there are new ideas and thoughts keeping on coming, that you don't lose this opportunity to rethink and revisit where we are. I think that's worth doing.
Thank you. We are collecting some questions. The idea was to also take into account your questions to plan the next webinars, because I guess that we can continue this kind of dialogue and perhaps open also the dialogue also to you like a circle of people who would like to share. I pick up just a couple of them just to complete the Q&A, and then we take your ideas, and please provide through the chat in the next days, because they are very important to understand what to do next. There is one point that I see quite important, is Purvesh, that I would say, he says that there is a different risk appetite between the senior generation and the next generation. And this risk appetite, of course, might influence how you deal with this kind of situation. And I guess that you have a next generation in your family. Farhad mentioned before that you have a dialogue with your son and daughter, and I'm sure that also Ajay with his family. How do you feel the differences in risk appetite? And you as a leading generation, what would you like to, I would say, to what extent are you open to rethink your risk appetite?
Well, you want to go first, Ajay, or should I?
Please, Farhad, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think yes, there is obviously, you know, everyone has a different view, and generations also sometimes think differently on different issues. But I think at a time like this, it's the time for generations to come together. And I think if you have dialogue and you have opportunity for each member to share what they think, and we all listen with very open minds, you come up with a consensual approach, which takes into account possibly the higher risk, which I think you're implying that the next generation would have, a higher risk appetite that the next generation would possibly have, and perhaps weighed down with the experience of the senior generation. But then you can actually come up with probably a better decision because it takes into account the views of all, and then everyone is behind it as well. That's my view, at least, on that point.
I'll just share again, in our family, we are 3 brothers in my generation, and there are 4 next-gen members who are working in the company. So there's 7 of us. We have tried to move on a basis, and because of the multiple number of businesses we have, each next-gen member is in a separate, what we call SBU, Strategic Business Unit, and they're not stepping on each other's toes in the same business. So we have that advantage. But at the family level, we actually have fixed every Friday we have lunch together with the 4 members of the next gen also. And they generally set the agenda, whether it was, frankly, I'm sharing here, after the annual seminar, annual FBN conference in Udaipur last year in October. For almost 3-4 meetings after that, when we met over lunch, the next gen members would raise issues of what we discussed there for debate and discussion among all 7 of us. So we want to keep that communication going. It's a fact, in the last 3 weeks since this lockdown, that has got little disrupted, but we want to reactivate that again. So we want to keep the communication going and give them the opportunity to share their thoughts, because they think differently. Their experience is different. Their exposure is different. Their friend circle is different. Their business circle is different. So they bring new ideas and thoughts which help. On the risk part of it, we have discussed in the family and said we are open to look at any new business opportunity, but it must be structured like a business proposal, which should be looked at by the family and a couple of non-family members to try to give it a little more objectivity. And we are not looking at it as only family. But I'll just mention one thing on business risk. And this is an experience which I'm sharing of being in business for 40 years now and seeing what's happened to companies. Ladies and gentlemen, the interest meter never stops ticking. There is no weekends, no holidays, no Republic Day, no Independence Day. The interest charge never stops. So please keep that in mind. Borrowing money is quite easy, but you have to pay it back with interest. So please be cautious. I think it is safer to not have a very overly ambitious growth plan which can lead to financial stress. Like, for instance, if 2 months ago or 3 months ago, who would have ever dreamt that the world will come to a virtual lockdown and a shutdown like we're experiencing today? There's a talk of the world GDP going down. Who would have dreamt that? So one has to have a little caution. It's wiser to be a little cautious than trying to jump too fast.
Thank you so much. A piece of wisdom, a piece of wisdom. And I can only add one point on that. There are a lot of research on entrepreneurship, and one of the questions is all about the risk appetite of the entrepreneur. And it's interesting to say that entrepreneurs, they don't like to take too much risk because their job is already under risk. So it's true that we have to do business model innovation changes and so on, but with the right balance between present and the future, liquidity and financial sustainability. So you have to balance a bit. So it's true. And then ideas should be structured. So a business plan, a discussion, a feasibility, something like that. We have just 2 minutes there is one point that I guess is important, then we are going to collect all the other questions and we try to keep in mind for the future. Is it going to be business as usual or going to be a dramatic change in the way of doing? And second, whether Indian economy would experience recession and or hyperinflation. What is your point of view in terms of, based on information that you have, business as usual or another word? And probably the second point that is, I would say, very important is the risk of having inflation again in the future, because if the state starts to pump money in the system, then we know that in the past this resulted in inflation.
Farhad, you want to? Okay, I'll go. I'll go on.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah.
I think my feeling is that business models will now change, at least for the next year or 2 years. I think many businesses will have a very tough time, depending, of course, on how long this lockdown and this coronavirus spread takes to come under control. But the unfortunate part is that many businesses will not be able to sustain. A lot will depend on government approach. We are seeing, like yesterday also, they came out with trying to give more cash to the hands of people, paying all the dues from the government, etc., etc. But this is not enough. One needs a lot more for many enterprises. We are today, the total assistance given is 0.9% of GDP. Out of that 0.9%, almost 0.3, 0.4% were part of what was already the schemes earlier implemented or already there and not implemented adequately. So it was about 0.5%. I think we need to go to between 4 and 5% of GDP. Today's scenario, printing money, distributing it to people, getting the markets activated, getting consumption going. I think that is the only way the economy can come back on track. And it is better, in my mind, to err on the side of giving a little more, because ultimately it's going to be in the economy. In today's world, no one is going to take 100 rupees extra and keep it in the cupboard. It will come back into the system, which will give a boost to the economy. So I think now is the time, even at the risk of a little inflation, it is well worth giving a boost to the Indian economy, giving money in the hands of our people, like I mentioned in the beginning. We have this fantastic scheme of virtually every family having a bank account. Put money into that bank account for 70–75% of the population. Let them come into the marketplace. Let them feel that confidence, the government is behind them. And they are a part of the economic scenario built up in the country. And unless we actually move forward with having a reasonable, good GDP growth, we have the big challenge of jobs. We have the big challenge of employment and many other challenges. I think we need the economy to grow, and now is the time. It is well worth taking that risk of giving a boost to the economy and giving it that extra push, even at the cost of slight inflation.
I would agree 100% with what Ajay just mentioned, that I think the time right now is to give people money so that they can survive. And the balance between managing inflation and giving a stimulus, now's not the time to even debate that. I think it just has to go into the system such that businesses survive, but more importantly, people survive. We do not have a social security net in India. And as we do not have a social security net, you cannot afford to have a situation where there is no income, and it's only a matter of time where you'll have social unrest and actually things will collapse as a result. So I think that's absolutely essential right now for the government to inject money into the system. The second point about business, whether business is going to be the same or business is going to be different, I think business will be different. This is such a big shock, and it's not just affecting one nation or one set of people, it's affecting everybody. And I think we're all learning new ways of working. And I think some of these new ways of working are actually pretty efficient, good ways of working. And I think that will become more and more the norm in the future. So how will this actually impact, you know, the tourism industry, the travel industry? Those are all things which are open questions, but I think we will be doing business probably somewhat differently in the future.
Thank you so much. Mamta, can you move to the slide of feedback? We are at the end. I would like, the first message is that please send us your feedback and your suggestions. So send us an email. Also some ideas about what we can do in the future as CII FBN India to help you to go through or to work through this period of time. And any kind of suggestions would be appreciated, very appreciated. I would like to thank you indeed, Mr. Farhad Forbes and Mr. Ajay Shriram for the time that they have spent with us today and for their wisdom and suggestion. Of course, I would like to thank all of you, wherever you are at the moment, and we wish you and your family the best in the next days, and we hope to enter in this recovery phase as soon as possible. On behalf of CII FBN India, thank you again, and looking forward to hearing you and to seeing you soon.
Thank you very much, Paolo, as well. Really appreciate
you. Paolo, the program and your fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Mamta, you're on the line? Mamta?
Yes, sir.
Mamta, what was the participation like?
Sir, it was around 97.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Good. Thank you, Mamta. I leave the Zoom room.
Thank you, Paolo. It was great having you here. Thanks a lot and great communicating once again.
Thank you again. And I hope to see you soon in person.
Look forward to that. Look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Farhad. Bye, Farhad.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mamta. Thanks. Great. I'm also getting off those, you know. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mamta, it's over.
Yes, please.
Can we disconnect now?
Yes, please. Thank you.